Yes. There you go.
Thank you. Welcome to the Health Forum. I'm Jerry Lenz, member of the board of Martin Towers, and we introduce Jeff Kohler, a friend, a great friend of St. Mark's Lutheran Church, affordable housing and Mark Square. So with that said, Jeff, want to tell about the future, the present, about what's going on here?
Okay. I don't have a microphone, but as most of the MLT board knows, I talk a lot and I'm loud, so hopefully y'all can hear me okay. Can everyone hear me okay? Y'all have a camera up there. Everyone hear me okay on Zoom? Thumbs up? Okay. And on Zoom, can everyone see the screen share where you see the purpose?
Yes.
Okay, great. Awesome. So anyway, good morning. Thanks very much for letting us use this opportunity to Health Forum to connect to Pastor Elizabeth's and Fred's talk last week. So if you were here last week, we were in the 1960s. Now you're going to jump forward about 60 years and we're going to come to today. Just so y'all know, so my name is Jeff again. I'm the executive director of Martin Luther Tower. That is a nonprofit that was started in the 1960s by St. Mark's Lutheran Church. And it's been a roller coaster ride. A couple of people in the room have been there. Before we start though, I do want to just acknowledge our board members. If y'all can wave or whatever you're doing that, whenever I mention your name. So Terry Lundblad is our president. Scott Taylor, our vice president, co-vice president. Shannon Cheney Valenti is our vice president. Susie Smith is our secretary. Joe Chadwick, MLT Tower resident, others on the board. Barbara Bach is on the board. I'm not sure that she's there. Oh my gosh, now I lost track. John Moeller, we're going to know John Moeller. He's a past president, and I'm missing someone. Oh, Barbara Ingman. Oh, now I'm in trouble. Anyway, I could not, and the people that I work with, we could not do what we're doing and about what I'm going to tell you today if it weren't for the time and efforts of all of the MLT board members, plus all the congregation staff and so forth. So in the 60s, if you look on the screen, and especially on the bottom part in red, where it starts with a special emphasis, thanks. That is the same purpose, word for word, from the 1960s. It has not changed. What did change when there was an update in 1997 is that it was, and this is somewhat what Fred was talking about last week, it was really important to signify to the Attorney General in the state, I would say to the community and to the congregation, that one of the purposes of MLT Inc. as a nonprofit is to support the goals and the missions of St. Mark Lutheran Church. I would say sort of period. But then they added on that purpose, that original purpose from the 1960s. And I'm just going to read it real fast so that everyone can follow along. And some of this language is outdated. We would not use this language today, and the board is in the process of updating this as we speak. But it's providing charitable and religious activities with a special emphasis. Hey, Susie, just so you know, we're watching you work out, and you're making us stronger as we go. Anyway, but to elderly person with housing facilities, such as Martin Luther Tower, and services specially designed to meet the physical, social, and psychological needs of the aged, and to promote their health, security, happiness, usefulness, and longer living. The charges for such facilities and services to be predicated upon the provision, maintenance, and operation thereof on a nonprofit basis. That is what MLT and the church have been doing for 60 years, and we're still doing that today. And I was just describing a little bit earlier. So we operate 121 units in Martin Luther Tower. We have a property management company that manages the property for us. In the beginning, it was actually, I think, congregation members that were managing the building. Become more complicated since then. We also have a partnership with Institute on Aging today. that provides resident services, a health educator, an activities director on a part-time basis to the residents that are living at the tower. So anyway, I just really wanted to sort of anchor everybody in those purposes to support the church, their goals and the mission, and still with a special emphasis on senior housing.
Jeff, if you could slow your voice,
Okay,
please.
thanks. So this is a map of the District 5 in San Francisco, and this is the supervisory district that we're currently working in. We're in active conversations with Supervisor Preston. We were before with Supervisor Brown to let them know what we're doing and asking for city support wherever we can. But right now, I wanted to put this up, and that blue dot is where the church is on District 5. You can see we're on the edge. And this is also where we kind of have overlapping services with San Franciscans that are in the Tenderloin. We certainly, help all of San Francisco, but this is one of the primary areas of our focus. And if you look at the resident demographic that lives at the senior building right now, a lot of our new residents come in from these areas, from the local neighborhood. Okay, this is really going to connect you to, and sorry, this is complicated, but I'm going to tell you what you're seeing on the screen is only about 2 months old. It's very, very current. But this is where we're really looking at what we have currently, connecting to the original mission, and how can we take that mission forward today. Some of what we have learned over the last year is many congregation members, when they think about the Martin Luther Tower Board, because that's the name of the apartment building, many congregation members think that the board only run that building. So if you look at the area all in yellow, and then if you include the parking lot that's up at the top of Farrell parking lot, that is all the area of St. Mark's Square that the board has governance over. And when I say that, we do it very much in connection with the church council. So MLT does have a board that operates it, but on top of that, there's a corporation where our board of trustees and the church council together make up the corporation of this nonprofit. So the important part to remember there is just, like Scott Taylor often says, we're actually two separate entities, but we act as one. And that's because the church founded it in the 60s. But the area in yellow that you're seeing is actually on one parcel of land in terms of how the city looks at it. A lot of times we refer this as to a tax parcel. So when they look at seeing what we're doing and how they're going to tax us, they look at the nonprofit activities or for-profit activities that we do. So what MLT is interested in doing is still continuing that mission of focus on housing for seniors. So in order to do that, we need to take that yellow area and kind of divide it up so that we can create individual parcels for new developments. And so what I'm going to show you next is how the steps that we would go to do that. So this is the same map, but all you're seeing on that bottom right-hand corner, there's a little outline in red where, and I'm going to go up to the screen real fast. Just to orient you real fast, this bottom right-hand corner, this is where the existing Martin Luther Tower is. So that's existing. The one right above it here, that's the Urban Life Center. Here's the church. So then behind the church is this parcel right here, which is the parking lot behind. So what we're doing, this was that whole yellow area. We go to the city, we have filed an application for this, is to say, we would like to put a dividing line here and a dividing line here to create 3 individual parcels. What that allows us to do is to take like this parcel, for example, and allows us to create a real estate partnership on that, which allows us to apply for a lot of federal, state, local subsidies that help us build the housing. But because we have an existing tower, we need it to be on its own independent parcel because all of the subsidies we get benefit that one building. This is where affordable housing can get really complicated. Each sort of affordable housing density needs to be on its own parcel. Okay, so I know this is a little confusing, but bear with me because the pretty pictures are coming, which are much easier to understand. So when we finish this parcel map, and this is what's going on with the square, these red outlines is what we would have left. We have these individual parcels, but you can see up top, we still have O'Farrell parking. And those lines up top, that is still the way it was lined out in the 1960s when the folks at that time were doing the work. And I do want to tell y'all that St. Mark's Square, if y'all haven't seen this book, and there's plenty of books over here on the left-hand side, people at Zoom, if you just email the church, we can get you a copy. There's a whole story of how all this came about in the history. So this is going to be a little bit easier to follow, and I'm just going to step over here again for the folks in the room. So here is Martin Luther Tower. So again, this is 120 units of senior affordable housing. So just to give you an example of what that means, so this is mostly one bedrooms. There's some studios, but I'm going to just give you a general term. The folks that apply to this building, generally, the maximum income would be 60% of the area median income. And there's multiple charts you can do, but that's generally 60% is around $55,000, $56,000 a year and below. So that amount and then below are the folks that can apply to live. We have very little turnover. Sometimes, anyway, we have very little turnover right now. We have about 1% vacancy overall. People tend to move in and they tend to stay there. It's really, they're very spacious apartments because they were built in the 60s. Anyway, here's the Urban Life Center, the church. And then what you're seeing here is a building overlay of what we've been working on, where this would be 94 more units of senior affordable housing, but brand new. And to give you an example of difference, so the income levels would be similar for people to apply. The units in Martin Luther Tower are probably 600 square feet on average. They would probably be more like 400, 450. That's cool. The costs are so expensive, they shrink a bit, but there's still a one bedroom unit. And then what this is showing is the proposed of how the courtyards would be in between the two buildings. What's important as we look at building a new building is how do you create community between these two buildings so that they feel like they're together. And so the other part we're focusing on is so that these buildings feel like they're all part of St. Mark's Square and they can feel that original mission. So sometimes when we write things, as we're looking at the future, this would be like Martin Luther Tower at St. Mark's Square. We really want people to know that they're part of the St. Mark's community and that they're always invited to come to the St. Mark's Church, but no matter what, the church has this mission of senior housing. So that's what the floor plan looks like. So let me just stop there now that you kind of see those real estate diagrams and sort of a map and see if anybody has any questions before I go any further.
The original one shows Martin Luther Tower. Is there another name?
There is. There is.
The older one is going to be Martin Luther
Yeah.
Tower at St. Mark's Square. What will the new one be called to have them related to each other?
Sure. So the question for everybody on Zoom was if the existing tower is called Martin Luther Tower, what would the new building be called? So a long story short, it is very difficult to build housing that's affordable. There's just not enough money out there. Through a relationship that MLT was introduced to through Pastor Elizabeth, there's a foundation by the name of Roth's Foundation. Was started, well, there was a really socially minded woman from the late 1800s When she passed, she was Lutheran by coincidence, which is how they got connected here. But when she passed away, she left a house on Lombard Street. She wanted her home to be utilized for elderly seniors that were low income. Starting to sound familiar to our mission. Anyway, so then her pastor, Lutheran pastor at the time, realized that this Victorian was kind of difficult for seniors to get around in with lots of stairs and so forth. They sold that man, and it was a mansion. We have some pictures of it. They sold the mansion and created the Ella Roths Foundation. That foundation, since that time, has created about 900 units of affordable housing in the Bay Area, all the way up to Napa. So this foundation is looking to use the remaining funds. They were looking for a development partner where they could grant the remaining funds, provided it would be senior affordable housing, and ideally would be services and in San Francisco. So all of their current board members are all Lutheran. So it's all through, and then lo and behold, we're Lutherans that have this spot that we want to build housing. So we're working on a really significant multi-million-dollar grant that would allow us to build this building. But in return, they want to honor her legacy, and it would be known as Ella Roth's Place. After her, one thing I'll point out to just give you a spirit of how we try to operate, we don't use the word apartments, even though they are apartments, because as I was telling you, once people get in, it tends to be their home. So they really want it to be like, hey, come live at Ella Roth's Place. So just like we tend to say, come live in the tower. You know, we don't say, here's the apartment, even though they're apartments. But anyway, it's a great question. But you can kind of see a lot of the connections there. Okay, this gives you a side angle of how it would look on the square. Ella Roth's is currently around 9 stories. This is under the current plan. I would tell you at this point, the drawings that you're looking at, you know, when you're starting to try to look at what we can build, we have to look at zoning requirements, zoning limits. What can we financially afford? So right now we're at 94 units and it's 9 stories. But you can see how it's, because we have a slope, and this is what a lot of people you miss sometimes. If you're up here on the O'Farrell parking lot and you go down to Ellis, there's quite a grade difference. If you've ever walked from Ellis up to O'Farrell, you know. You can ask Joe and Barbara Bach. They've walked it a lot. But anyway, but this is what it would look like. And we're beginning to look at the courtyard that are in between the 2 buildings to see how they connect. But then what we don't want to forget, how does it connect to the Urban Life Center? How does it connect to St. Mark's Square Common Area? How does it connect to the church? But it gives you an idea of what that would look like.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Parking.
So there's no parking in the Ella Roth's building. The only parking lot that we would have left at this point is up in the O'Farrell parking lot. There's a lot of emphasis on protecting the upper lot because, as y'all know, the parking is really paramount to the church.
Why can't we do underground parking?
Because we tried probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and it's so cost prohibitive that we just weren't able to do the building. It's going to be a challenge. There's
Well, you know, if people would think parking, and then they would do it.
yeah.
Some people don't want to sell their vehicle.
Totally got it. It's a challenge. It's a challenge all over the city.
So where would these people park in the new building?
So most of the people in this building they would either have to find another parking space. So some of this is doing a partnership with a new hospital. Y'all may not know it. They are overparked they have about 200 extra spaces. So we'd have a relationship with them, but they would have to provide or find parking outside of this building. This building is not going to serve everybody. What we're looking for is 94 seniors, low-income seniors that need housing, and parking is not prioritized in this building. There's no other way around it. All right, let me take the next question.
Are you telling us you're gonna destroy the parking that's under the tower now?
Right, correct. That-
That's bad.
That parking, that top upper lot goes away in order to create the space for the 90 units of housing.
Yeah, but that doesn't have anything to do with what's now in the parking lot. You can't use that. Just all boxed in between the existing parking lot and this outside the building itself. And I think you're doing a terrible service to the people in the tower if you think they're gonna walk up in the middle of the night, parking lot in front of the church. That's a very bad idea.
So totally appreciate where you're coming from. We've heard this issue before, and it's a matter of trying to prioritize housing or trying to prioritize parking.
What housing are you gonna go underneath the tower?
What housing is what?
Yes, I'm talking about the parking lot under the tower. That's a separate facility from the parking lot that's out the back of the church here.
Yeah, so there's not parking under the tower. There's parking next to the tower. Is that what you're talking about?
Under the tower.
There's no parking under the tower.
Have you evicted all the cars from under the tower?
No, but we have about 15 residents that park in the gated lot right now. And
That's
I'm
what I mean.
right there. We are going to have to work with those 15 residents to find out how we can best serve them. This is a very difficult challenge. And look, this is the reason we're wanting to share this with everybody. So we can come together in the community and just kind of walk through this. For housing, to build this 94 units of housing.
No. What do you think you're gonna use the space under the tower for?
So there's nothing underneath the tower, though it's in the tower right now on the bottom floor are management offices and services offices. Yeah, there's no parking underneath.
All right, so you're gonna cannibalize the outdoor parking behind us here now. That's what's gonna.
Right, the outdoor parking. Right.
How is it going to be prioritized in the front lot? And are we going to create it so that it's just for residents, the church members?
Up here in O'Farrell. So it's a great question. So we've already started that way. So if you may have noticed during COVID, we resurfaced the parking lot and then also painted along, there's this line that says SMLC reserved parking. So this is where MLT as a board and nonprofit work with their church council. And I may have the exact number wrong, but we put in 26 reserved parking space for the church. No one else parks there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. As we move our way into the future, the other parking spaces, which I think there's about, I'm gonna get these numbers wrong, but there's about 40 spaces, 30 or 40 spaces that we lease to the Felton Institute. It used to be the Family Institute. We may end that lease so that the whole parking lot gets prioritized for the church. What we have to balance is this financial, it's the financial balance. We enjoy the revenue from this parking. So if we take the parking revenue away, we need to find a way, well, how, whatever we're using that revenue in terms of being able to operate the square, we have to figure out how to replace that revenue if it's needed. But by all means, O'Farrell is prioritized for the church.
May I ask a question? I'm up here on Zoom. This is Cora. I'm on Zoom. I am really excited about this plan. It looks beautiful. I'm wondering, I mean, I imagine that the pastors will be able to continue to serve both towers and plan senior events for both buildings, hopefully in conjunction together and create community. I can't really tell from the plan, is there any like physical breezeway or corridor between the two buildings, or will they just use the courtyard to access each one?
So right now, the way this drawing, it's a great question, Cora, thanks. So there's a few things there to share with everybody. There's definitely breezeways between each building. Some of that is because that's nice to have, but also because there's building setbacks required by the building code where we can't build exactly to the line. What we're doing now, so I would tell you, we did these drawings. We put up that we estimated 94 units of senior housing. Then we had to work with contractors to find out, well, how much is that going to cost? just so y'all know, just to build 94 units of affordable housing, this is around $70 million. That's how much it costs. And that's why it's so difficult. And this is without parking. If you add parking, it even becomes more than that. And right now, typically affordable housing is built with federal, state, or local subsidies. None of those subsidies will support parking, only prioritizing housing. But what they will support is the housing and with services inside the building. So right now at the existing senior tower building, we have a chaplaincy agreement between that church and St. Mark Lutheran Church. So for the pastors can provide that chaplaincy care. In many cases, you guys, our residents that don't have family, Pastor Elizabeth, Pastor Ron, when he was here, and the previous, well, Pastor Elizabeth been here a long time. That is the last person that is with them when they are dying. It's an incredible service. And we would have, and so as we've worked with our developer, we would have a similar chaplaincy agreement likely in our new building. But also what we add to that is Institute on Aging, where we have those resident services, activities director, as well as a health educator. So Cora, we would look to replicate those. And so Institute on Aging is actually part of the development conversations where we would look at how the connections, whether it's walkways or if there's our architect is going to look at if there's a way that we can connect the two buildings through an enclosed walkway or shared meeting space or like a heritage, think about a heritage hall in between the buildings. This is where our two communities would meet. So Andy, did that answer the question?
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Jeff, underground parking is a $4 million spot, right?
Yeah, it's about $250,000 a space. $250,000 a space is what it costs to add one parking space to a tower. Underground. Anyway, well, is there another question back here?
Just very briefly. I would just think the ULC historically has been essentially the one productive into the future. It might not be the conversation today, but is there a plan to construct housing on the ULC or something related to housing or something more productive?
So I'm going to give you two responses there, and then I'll see if there's any questions on the Zoom. So one, in terms of the ULC, there was a period where there was some unoccupied space. What I can report to you today, and we just did this in our annual report, it's 100% occupied, which we call, it's the St. Mark Square Community of Nonprofits, where we've got services for homeless, family, youth, food insecurity, and there's more homeless programs. Like even this morning, I was emailing someone that we provide services for domestic violence programs. The ULC, if you haven't been in it lately, you probably wouldn't recognize it. It's been greatly improved, lighting, carpeting, so forth, but it is fully occupied. But you set up my next slide very well. Because now the development committee and the board, and I will tell you, it represents 10 to 12 years of work just to try to get to this point, because you can want affordable housing all you want. And look, we want 100% affordable housing. We own the land free and clear, and there's still not enough money to build it. It is a struggle. I mean, as y'all know, you see in the news. So the development committee, I'm going to give big kudos to Barbara Ingman and John Moeller here because they've been very steadfast in this. Now that we've got ourselves realizing that if we can find a partner like Ross, we look at the federal programs that are called low-income housing tax credits, where we get down to where we think we can close this gap to make it possible, which is about this 94 units, 9 stories. We're looking at, well, what would that potentially look like if we can successfully do this, which we think we're very close. Could we do that again at the Urban Life Center? But there's a lot of questions there that the board, this is the subject of our board retreat in October. The community and nonprofits really served our larger community beyond St. Mark Square. The church also had, this is a whole nother conversation. They have about 5,000 square feet, and they used to have about 10,000 square feet of programming space. But we looked at just putting in a floor in the Ross building to replace all of that, and it's about $6 million extra just for that space. So there's just a lot of cost implications, right? But anyway, let me stop, see if does anybody on Zoom have any questions?
I need to correct myself. I was thinking we have parking under the tower now. It's only adjacent. To the tower.
Adjacent to the tower.
So all that squared in fencing is under the plaza.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
I still say that it's parking. When we originally built the buildings, the Urban Life Center, the basement was actually a garage.
Parking.
And we convinced the city that that wasn't needed for parking space, that we converted it to a basement. And obviously, to other office uses, but if you converted that back to what it was originally designed to have garages that would be adjacent to the tower.
Exactly.
But then you need an office space, so.
No, it's sort of this domino, but that's, I mean, it's a great point. It was built, so we've looked at, that is probably one of the best places that could be parked. And I mean, you know, there's already retaining walls, they're probably not up to current code, built that allowed that subterranean level of the Urban Life Center. But yeah, that is the most logical place to put that parking. And let me, before I get to there, because I'm going to get to the Urban Life Center, let me see if there's any questions on Zoom.
Jeff, Margaret on Zoom has a question.
Oh, great, thanks. Hey, Margaret? You want to ask your question? Nope.
It's muted still, so.
Okay, I'll go forward, but we can stop. Okay.
Margaret?
Anyway, if Margaret comes on, we'll stop to answer her question. Or Margaret, if you
Oh,
want to.
Margaret doesn't have a microphone.
Oh.
So that's.
Margaret, there's a chat option. If
Yeah,
you want to, yeah, if you can put your question in the chat, then Kyle will read it out loud and we'll respond to it. The picture on the screen right now shows you what the square would look like in terms of the church, the Urban Life Center, and if Ella Ross was built on the location. So this is kind of getting to your questions now, where this, let me just point it out on the screen. This is the existing senior tower building. This would be Ella Ross. This up here is if we put the exact kind of building, but you'll see this is kind of an L. This is an upside down L. If we did this exact same building, but put it on the Urban Life Center side. So again, this is what the MLT board is going to be looking at in October, is what are all the choices here? And you probably can't see these, but these blue boxes are so that we can look at replacement church offices, church programming space. And this is where the church council will be working with the MLT board. And in fact, Jeremy just sent us about a month ago some space requirements of what the church will be looking at. Again, you're trying to match your sort of wishes, wants, and desires with the financial requirements to make that possible. But this gives you an idea of what the courtyard could look like, where there's steps that go going down below. This thing right here is like waterfalls that would cascade from the upper levels to the lower levels. Again, you're trying to create a place of community for the residents that live on the square, but we're also trying to create a sense of community so the larger San Francisco community, when they're walking by, would be attracted to this park. I can just tell you now, if you walk the square, you've probably noticed we've done a lot of improvements. We've done a lot of landscaping cleanup, a lot of flower beds. There are more and more people on the square that just say that it just looks like a park. The opposite of that is there's a lot of dogs, and I'm a dog owner, but they love coming in here, and I'm like, no, use the bathroom on the new grass. But anyway, it comes with its issues. But this is part of what we're looking at. And this is kind of the reason, the purpose of today's health forums is we need to remember our history. what people's original vision of the square, what so many of the board members and past congregation members over the last 60 years have worked so hard to realize. But it's trying to capture that baton, work with the challenges of today, the needs. I mean, you already heard parking's a big one. But it's also trying to create affordable housing, and it's probably one of the most difficult cities to create it in. And this is just one vision of what the square could look at, and so this is what the board is looking at. From a real kind of strategic point of view.
Related to the price, that would extend on the property that belongs to St. Mark's. Is that correct?
That's correct. Good eye. Good eye. So that's why the church and MLT have to work together. So this area right here is where the parsonage used to be, and there's a parcel that's owned by the church, which is why, again, the church and MLT, again, two separate entities, but we really act as one, trying to have this one common purpose. There would have to be a lot line adjustment for those parcel lines that were drawn. There would have to be a lot line adjustment to have that happen.
So it was actually Mary who asked the question on Zoom, was about, is it possible for is there possibly temporary housing available in the Ella Ross? She's asking on behalf of the social ministry, if there was need to temporarily house people. Ours is going to be 100% always full 12-month leases or whatever it may be.
So it's a great question. So right now as a design, it's 100% met for it. Like when someone moves in, the minimum lease is 1 year. So there would be no temporary housing. That being said, here's what I want to tell you. This is not like completely ironed out in stone. We're just pushing against something that we have found that's financially feasible. Again, this is where the church council and the MLT board are working close hand in hand to listen to these requests. I also want y'all to know, I think there's a very common agreement that we would like this housing to serve the most vulnerable in our community, which some of what this temporary housing addresses. But to serve the most vulnerable means less rent. If you have less rent, it means you need more subsidy and support from the federal, state, or local government to build it. It just creates more of a gap. But even though we think that we're very close with this 94 unit model, it will not stop us from looking for more subsidy. There's a program, I don't know if you're familiar with it, it's one of the more popular ones called the HUD 202. It's highly competitive. It is generally awarded to projects that are almost ready to start being built. It's kind of this weird scenario, but our site is highly competitive. It competes very well, scores very well. But if we were successful in awarding it, all of the seniors in the building would only have to pay 30% of their income, and the federal government would pay the rest. That's just one example. We're going to the city asking for more subsidy. We're going to the state asking for more subsidy. In fact, Barbara Ingman sent me an email a couple of days ago. You may have heard last week, Governor Newsom has new housing funds. Whatever we can do, if we could add some formerly homeless housing, temporary housing, we will. It's just every time you have a need, it has a dollar sign, and that's the challenge. I mean, this is the challenge of our whole life, but we're trying our best to meet that mission. Anyway, is there any other question?
I actually have a question myself.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Hey,
Go
Barbara,
ahead.
I'm sure Barbara has something to add to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think if we did carve out some for temporary housing, that we would lose the tax credits on that apartment, which could have a serious financial impact on our ability to not only build the building, but to maintain it.
Yeah, we would have to have a replacement subsidy because we would lose the tax credit funding that allows us to build it. That may not sound logical in one hand. It's just the tax credit is one pot of money. They serve one group of people. The temporary housing would be another, and you have to get those programs to match and agree to work with each other. And that is not always the case, even though you think it would be.
How do you think you're going to advance a $90 million project?
So Pretty complicated. We're literally meeting on that this next week, but it's primarily through tax credit housing, bond financing. And then this is where that Roth's multi-million-dollar grant comes in, is to close that gap. I mean, literally the Roth's money is what makes it possible. It's a little bit over $5 million. It's a big grant.
Pam has a question.
Oh, Pam?
Hi. So last week we heard that the one of the original plans for the Martin Luther Tower was that it would serve a purpose of providing housing to the population that was displaced by redevelopment, but that fell through because the inability to get funding for that. And so I'm wondering, with this possibility of the HUD 202 funding, does that not only make it feasible, but would including that as part of the mission actually enhance the application?
Yeah, it's a great question, Pam. And let me just tell you, right now, our structure is more tax credit housing, which is what the existing towers are financed under. We are going to compete for the 202, but we don't have that yet. Sorry. So one of where MLT is matching the church is we also have a racial equity, diversity, and inclusion, objective. And this kind of gets to the folks that were originally displaced in the 1960s. But that's why you saw that map in the very beginning of the presentation, where our focus is really on District 5, which really encompasses the bulk of the Western Addition, sort of this side of NOPA. And so it's pretty complex. It has to be approved because there's fair housing guidelines. But ideally, you would have local preferences for District 5. Then our next local preference might be in the Tenderloin District. And I always mix up what number that is. But that's kind of how you address that, where there's preference, even though you may have a waiting list, there's the folks that are prioritized on that waiting list are based on this preference of what happens. Oh, thanks, Terry.
I don't know where this question is. It's even probably, what is parking security?
Parking security?
My car was stolen out of the church lot.
Out of the church lot. So up during COVID, we did have security 5 days a week. There's no other way, kind of the need for parking. The glass breakage, cars getting stolen, we are under the same challenges of the city. Trying to figure out our biggest thing that we're gonna be able to do, like with the landscaping, we've cleaned a lot of landscaping where people were hiding out previously. But also, you'll see we upgraded some of the lighting, but as we look at the whole square, it just overall, we want to improve the lighting, which would be one of the best things that we could do.
Well, I was malnourished. So I
Yeah. Well, thank goodness you had insurance for sure. Yeah, good.
And decided I didn't need a car.
Okay. I know that's what a lot of it will face. Right. It's a challenge.
I'm getting tickets on this still. Parking by citizens. I don't know where the car is fitted.
I haven't heard that before. Anyway, let me see if there was one. Was there one other question here? Or any more on there, Kyle? Okay.
It's 10:50. So
Do what?
it's 10:50. So
Oh, 10:50. Okay.
I just want to thank you and the board for all your efforts. I think this is very well done.
Thank you.
One last thing. I used to have a house in a gated community up in the country. They have public road going through it just like this. But they closed it at night with gates. Fire department always has access. There's a signal that every fire truck has that will open the gates. So I don't know if it's possible. The reason you have to have through route now is because of fire access. I don't know if it would be possible to have some sort of a nighttime view.
You're on Oak Farrell lot, right?
Just only on Oak Farrell.
So we've done some preliminary research on this. And so from the local fire department and the emergency officials, the city does have easements on Oak Farrell for the right to use, but they're reworking of Van Ness and sort of their connectors. They no longer rely on the easement the same way they did. So the fire department said they thought the city would be much more open and potentially approve for us to gate that lot. So that we could do that. So that is part of it. As this plan, we would look at, acquiring the city approvals. But, and when I say this, y'all need to know that the church needs to agree with it, MLT board, right? So everybody needs to be on board, because there's some people that don't want anything to do with fencing, right? Everything sort of has its, pros and cons, but they seem to be very open to before, maybe 10 years ago, they would not have been. So we're researching it. Anyway, so I know Kai was saying we need to wrap up because we have the service coming up, but this last slide, we wanted to show you of the current depiction of what the Roths building would look like. So you can see we're trying to build attractive communities that fit into the neighborhood and really act as an asset. Excuse me?
We'll have a table of Dominican.
Oh, that's right. Thanks. Before I say that, the one thing I want to point out is on this, because this is complicated, but there's little nuances. If you see this little level, it's reading brown along here on this bottom of the senior tower. And you see where that comes through here, that is actually meant to be red brick or to mimic red brick so that we can create a visible connection to St. Mark's Lutheran Church. It's really important for us for people to know there's a connection to the church. And it was really the church that sponsored this and made all this possible. Anyway, so I know you can see lots of questions, interesting project, a lot of dynamics, but next Sunday, we're going to have a ministry fair to talk a lot more about, because we are a ministry of St. Mark's. Hopefully it's weather like today, we're going to be outside, but I'll be there with any more questions that you have next week. And we'll have more of these come as we gain more information, but thank you all very much. And thanks to everybody on Zoom.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Bye. See you later. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Take Elder. Yeah. In terms of user expenses, it's the Elder Tower, this paper board, to be honest.
Keep behind you, Lauren.
So,
Yes.
yes.
So
I was
we
remembering
wouldn't
that.
do this.
Yeah.
We'll update it between what
Oh.
we did last time.
Very good, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Thanks.
Of course. And you know what? It is super interesting, but it's super complicated. And it's hard to.
Down from Petaluma.
Yeah.
So.
We have.
Other spaces, I know. What about Sunday church? They coordinate with the side of little passes.
Right. We can have those passes.
Right.
And that's what we're trying to do. Especially if they're.
Right.
The other part also of that is we could valet park and then people would park like this. The valet would actually. Or they just set up a parking lot. And the other part I should have mentioned is where probably seeing.
Yeah, the double.
We would zone the streets. As well as on Ellis to do that.
Right.
And so this is a negotiation with the city to say,
we will build affordable housing. You give us a variance on our parking.
It's a win-win for them, though, because it's Sunday morning.
And one other
Yes.
thought, Calvin, considering April to November with right now, can it be like a rock river
Totally.
with the
Totally.
possibility of water during rainy season?
Yes, and
Okay.
what you'll see on this landscaping, everything is properties.
Perfect.
For sure.
Thank you.
So, thank you, Jeff, for your hard work. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for your tough question.
Well, I still think, if it was parking, I wouldn't give up.
No, we're trying to.
Joanne.
Good to see you. Well, you look so much like Shelby,
Oh.
right? It's easy for me to go, Shelby, Joanne, Fred. That's how I back up to you. No, you know what? It's even when you read these books, your federal history, you see all these challenges. We can have the parking if we want. So the city has said that we have to fundraise. So we, it is, well, loss is harder because it's only zoned for 9 stories. And even though we can go a little higher, what we're trying not to do is what?
Yeah, right, I could see a good proportion.
Right, so with the ULC replacement. It's only limited, right? So we can actually go bigger, which would allow us to provide at least have one layer or so of parking. I mean, we looked at parking that would go, it's about 300 and something barrel. We want parking. But here's the current conversation are, and truly on October 2nd, this is the retreat of what. Okay, because I will say, I didn't want to. The board, like John Mueller has asked me, don't make it sound so. Because we're not. That we're looking at it off tomorrow. When we meet on Wednesday, so $2 million. The reason that it's about 4 to 5 million. So that's how it closed. Yeah. However, Ross is our previous CEO. Another one is friend of Charles Schwab. Another one is friend of and they said, we're going to find to in the Institute on Aging, they said basically in total housing, they're giving $2 million. Oh my God, but they said they would access their network to help us. Because what we prefer to do is take that $2 million and either lower the income requirement of a few units, so that we're helping people at lower income levels, or take that money, not to for replacement church offices. Some of it is just, it's going to require us to go raise that money, but then that becomes, that's the purpose of the retreat is, I need to know how much money I'm trying to raise. Am I trying to raise 3 million or
Well, you know, and actually, that's it. And I forgot about this. The land out here.
Thanks, sir.
yeah, totally, all of it. It's really
That's
not
why
just
we
server.
were, that's why we were building
Chapel
the
Street.
chapel building on this end, because we have all,
You know,
that you could tap through. But you could build a small building. Let's see. I don't think a couple $100,000, but not too much. Frame building, 1 story high, that would house all the church offices. But I think if you try to tap through to the other building, you're going to have a fire department. You'd have to have causeway, 6, 8, 10 feet.
yeah, that's the problem. Then it's more money. You want to finish. So at the retreat, I know you have a bunch that you have to get to by 10, I think. That day. October 2nd.
Yeah, I'll have to look. Let's see.
Oh, it's a
the
Danish.
Danish lunch. Well, I have to get up.
So
I knew.
we wanted to, let me just show you. This is what's funny about you standing right here. So here are all these excerpts from many of this, some of this you wrote. You know, you recognize some of this stuff. But this is the homework prep that I'm sending to the current board next week. So they have 2 months to read. And there's another, this other letter that you wrote to the Attorney General that you were referencing last week. I'm including that as well. So what we're trying to do is remember the history, start the retreat with the connection of now you really understand the history. Now let's look at those challenges. So our archetype, and we have these different scenarios so that you all see. One of them is we leave it just like it is, and we have it. And it's like, look, if the priorities church offices, we have a bill. Yeah, right. And now I only need to raise $1 million, right? So another one is you take that exact building, turn the first floor into parking. The structure there. And we would probably do something. So that's another option. Another option is leave the ULC and you build the chapel, what you're saying, with frame, travel, administration, but you complete the vision. Another version. Another version is the urban life center. I mean, an El Ross over here that you add in for church offices and parking. And now the question is, do we add that on the floor to accommodate these nonprofits? Because what we've seen is these nonprofits and like it's sort of mind-blowing to see. Anyway, but then there's another version that has a 20-story tower, which I don't think anyone's going to go for. It's just so stupid. It's what all of a sudden the square gets imbalanced, just from aesthetically, the church gets hidden. But there's like 11 or 12 options. But it's sort of taking that history, today's challenges. Here's the options. Let's start narrowing our to the 3, and that's going to be the work of next year. I mean, much like y'all did in the 60s.
But that is the best way to go. Very hard to use.
It's very hard. Now, I will, so we have some, I'm going to say fledgling nonprofits in there right now that they are truly, I mean, they're building on their operations. They're leasing at about $40 per foot. Downtown is more like 75. It's about half the cost. I mean, it's truly serving its original intent. Yeah. But anyway, all of this has led up to develop.
Yeah. We could have a bar and have dancing or something at the night of the week.
Well, we did, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. Well, we had salsa dancing on the square a month or 2 ago, and we upset someone here, and she was going to yank down the speakers, and it's too loud. And then one of our third parent, the one that does these family services, you may have seen it, the petting zoo, whatever. That senior didn't like it. Even our seniors were fine. They said they was a little loud, but they said it was fun to see activity.
Well, I probably did the sporting event, 3 or 4 people, 5 people going back and forth, just walking.
Yeah.
Out there just to get fresh air.
Yeah. The swimmers,
They're not going to be allowed.
Anyway, thank you so much.
Great job, let's do.
Oh, thank you. Okay, we'll see you.
Okay, but we'll, so hey, Fred, I'm going to send you a copy of this,
Yeah,
just so that you know what everyone received.
I do expect that meeting to be all day on the 2nd.
No, it will end at 1. It starts at 8:30, just with like a 30-minute breakfast. There's an hour we do, and then it goes to like 12:30. Then there's lunch with the church council, and then it's done.
Okay. Okay,
Well, you're welcome. You're welcome to all of it.
yeah, thank you.
And then so.
I know. Meanwhile, you're like, no, he's not. Thanks, Joy.
Well, did it.
Yeah, no, you know what? The parking is one.
Trail, you want to, just think again, really important, people up there. We're gonna tear this down. It's an
Well,
economic
you know
trade-off.
what? I think everyone. And then at the end, he's like, okay.
Okay,
All right, enjoy your Goo Goo cluster.
I will.
Oh my God, I got them.
How was Nashville, the conference?
They, I mean, the main reason I went.
Yeah.
And I knew he looked like everybody, but I saw this person like. So we went up to him. I'm like, "How are you? Nice to meet you." And in my head, I'm like. He goes, really cool speed. He goes, I made it down the hill, I didn't make it back up. But it was good. I think what this was. And what's happening is that I think people like there's a lot of different ways. But otherwise it was very, very good.
So, good for Jeremy on Friday?
Yeah, sweet. Yeah, I want to make sure, so anyway, this is I don't know, you know, there's.
They see what's going on, you all see.
I hope so. I know what. Hey, I did want to ask you, you're gonna meet on Friday.
Yep. I'll be here on. Here either Tuesday or Thursday.
take the last one. So I have this all organized. Yeah. Table of contents. I started this sort of in the summary, and then I realized something sort of needed to be. And I'm gonna take the key code so that I can see but
So, I can be here Tuesday afternoon.
I don't think it'll take us more than. I just want to make sure that, I think you're gonna recognize your system. I just want to make sure you, are okay. Yeah. There may be.
Okay, I can do that. I'll be right after like 4 o'clock.
Perfect. Yeah, because then I can finish up that day, then I can get,
Good.
I'm shutting all this down right now.
Hope that's your phone, Jeff.
It is. Oh, yeah, with a big dog on it?
Oh, yeah, it hit the floor.
Oh, it did? Okay.
There's a button here. We're going to stream the service down there. Okay?
are they?
What the night? This isn't yours, is it? This is. Tablet.
Is this sure?
Yeah, who I bet that is.
Oops.
Kyle's. Or it's the controller for that.
Yeah, yeah.
So, Jerry, I got those, we went to, because my sister, we can do that, my sister. So, this is my sister. So we went to have this. How much? So that's where we're anyway. So we went there, this woman, Barbara Child. She had a big I think we're they're so sweet. And I might, and that would to me. And well, they're apparently payments and that. I remember the detectives that they got. Michael, covered the child, so covered. I thought we'd see what you like. You're throwing away. I want you to no. We don't have to.
Oh, Sandy said to come up from my company.
I think so. I need to talk to her. I don't talk. But I think so. I sent, email. She would go to Dan. Kind of describe it. I asked him. Hours. That's what we're just trying to spread it and create a path. And we'll make sure. Now we're in full strategy. And I worked on the side. I was overseeing the property manager. Factories to potentially shift our highway. Oh, I think, oh, I thought, I don't. We're okay. Or your water. I think no, I traded him. He hasn't responded. I thought. I go with yeah. So I'm going on very much. He did it, that's well. Oh, God. Oh, yeah, I wanted to tell you, so that Edgard, this is the yeah, that he does this counseling. Got his things certified. I'm just going to try to work. It's in my great. We have an agreement, so anyway, so if you're okay with it, I mean, consider the way that home.
I think we need to change the code. The conference room is fine. The other code is the same as the church. So if they go to the restroom, they come back. No, it's all over the church.
Okay, we'll do and said, people basis of the park. So I was going to work. There was some between what she told one and a little bit of. So what I would do is suggest is third Monday of the month, the 6th. Question, but otherwise.
Friday. Oh, cheers. Just what I mean, trash. So you need some type of security.
Yeah, well, I thought so. Yeah. So you can do that, and I told Juan that I think.
You know, they free. Pay for it.
I think it's the part of me, but then it switched. And where they had a. I think we can bring that one at the same time. Yeah, thank you. Oh my God.
So you just kind of,
No, man.
I hope that's not set step.
Well,
Maybe it would work out. I think she believes.
she went through her office.
Okay, I'll see Fred. No,
I'll be here. But anyway,
It's too hard.
yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
This is illegal.
Hi there.
not want to read your all of it.
Anyway.
That will keep this out there going forever.
Yes, I do.
It's time to get rid of this thing.
Yeah.